The story begins on a hot summer afternoon with Mike Lawson driving his 18-wheeler through the back roads of rural Alabama. He's behind schedule, and the radio crackles with a weather report warning of a storm approaching the region. Determined to make up for lost time, Mike consults his map and spots an unfamiliar route that promises to cut several hours off his journey. The route is along Highway 29, a road he's never traveled before. Despite the nagging feeling in the back of his mind, Mike decides to take the shortcut. He reasons that he's driven through countless unfamiliar roads before without any trouble, and this time should be no different. He turns off the main highway onto Highway 29, the road narrowing and the landscape becoming increasingly remote and desolate. As Mike drives further into the unknown, the sky begins to darken, heavy clouds gathering overhead. The once paved road turns into a cracked, uneven stretch of asphalt, flanked by dense, overgrown trees that seem to close in around him. The air grows thick with humidity, and a sense of unease starts to creep in. The road ahead stretches on, winding through the dense forest, with no signs of civilization in sight. The uneasy feeling in Mike's gut intensifies, but he presses on, his focus on getting back on schedule. The shadows cast by the trees grow longer as the sun sets and the road becomes more treacherous, filled with potholes and sudden bends. Suddenly, Mike's truck shudders violently as the engine sputters and the headlights flicker. He pulls over to the side of the road, cursing his luck, and steps out to check the engine. As he works, the oppressive silence of the forest around him becomes apparent. There's no sound of birds or animals, just an eerie stillness that sets his nerves on edge. As Mike finishes checking the engine, finding nothing obviously wrong, he hears a faint sound, a rustling in the trees, followed by what sounds like distant, echoing laughter. The noise is unsettling, but he brushes it off, chalking it up to his imagination. He climbs back into the cab and starts the engine again, relieved when it roars to life. He drives on, but the sense of unease only deepens. The road becomes increasingly surreal, with familiar landmarks seeming to appear and disappear as if the landscape itself is shifting. The air inside the cab grows colder, and Mike starts to notice strange occurrences. His radio flickers with static, playing distorted voices and eerie melodies, and the GPS loses signal, displaying only a blank screen. As night falls, the headlights barely penetrate the thick fog that suddenly rolls in, reducing visibility to just a few feet ahead. The road feels endless, winding through the dark forest with no sign of an exit. The fog seems almost alive, swirling with shapes that disappear when Mike tries to focus on them. The terrifying occurrences escalate when Mike notices something in his rearview mirror, a dark figure standing in the middle of the road just behind his truck. He slams on the brakes and looks again, but the figure is gone. His heart pounds, and he begins to feel like he's being watched. Every time he glances in the mirror, he sees brief flashes of movement, a shadow darting between the trees, a face appearing for a split second before vanishing. Mike's mind races as he realizes he's no longer in control of his situation. The road ahead becomes a labyrinth of fear, with the landscape around him warping and shifting. He drives past old abandoned buildings that seem to appear out of nowhere, their windows dark and foreboding. Strange, inexplicable sights fill the roadside, ghostly apparitions, creatures that defy logic, and the echoes of long-forgotten voices. At one point, Mike's headlights reveal a gruesome scene, a twisted, wrecked car on the side of the road with no sign of the driver. As he slows down to investigate, the car bursts into flames, the fire roaring up into the sky before quickly extinguishing itself, leaving no trace behind. The surreal and horrifying events push Mike's fear to the brink, and he knows he must get off this road before it's too late. The nightmare intensifies as Mike's truck is assaulted by the supernatural forces inhabiting Highway 29. The shadows in the trees become more defined, taking on twisted, monstrous forms that seem to reach out towards the truck. The temperature inside the cab drops drastically, and Mike's breath fogs up the windows as a sense of impending doom grips him. Suddenly, the road ahead splits into multiple paths, each one more ominous than the last. Mike knows he must choose, but every turn seems to lead him deeper into the heart of the curse. He tries to turn the truck around, but the road behind him has disappeared, replaced by an impenetrable wall of fog and darkness. Desperation takes hold as Mike floors the gas pedal, pushing the truck to its limits in a frantic attempt to escape. The truck roars down the road, the trees blurring into a dark tunnel of fear, The supernatural occurrences reach a fever pitch. Objects inside the cab move on their own. The radio blasts haunting voices, and the dark figure from before reappears, this time in the middle of the road ahead, forcing Mike to swerve violently to avoid it. The truck skids off the road, crashing through the underbrush before coming to a halt in a clearing. The headlights flicker and die, leaving Mike in complete darkness. Panic grips him as he fumbles to restart the engine, but it's dead. The silence is suffocating, and Mike feels the presence of something watching him from the darkness. With no other options, Mike grabs a flashlight and steps out of the truck, his hands trembling. The air is thick with the smell of decay, and the trees around him seem to pulse with a life of their own. He knows he needs to find the road again, but the forest is disorienting, the paths shifting and changing as he moves. As he pushes through the dense underbrush, Mike stumbles upon an old weathered sign, half buried in the dirt. The words are barely legible, but he can make out enough to realize it's a warning about the curse of Highway 29. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. He's trapped in a place where fear becomes reality, and there may be no way out. Determined to survive, Mike pushes forward, refusing to give in to the terror that surrounds him. He retraces his steps, searching for any sign of the road, but the forest is a maze, each turn leading him further into the darkness. The strange occurrences continue. Whispers in the trees, ghostly figures darting in the corner of his vision, and the constant feeling of being followed. Just as hope begins to fade, Mike hears the distant sound of an engine, a low, rumbling growl that cuts through the silence. He follows the sound, his heart pounding with both fear and desperation. After what feels like an eternity, he stumbles back onto the road. His truck somehow miraculously parked on the shoulder, its lights on and engine running. Mike doesn't question the impossibility of it. He scrambles into the cab, slams the door shut, and floors the gas. The truck lurches forward, the road stretching out ahead like a lifeline. The supernatural forces seem to pull back as he gains speed, the dark forest receding into the distance. As he drives, the fog begins to lift, and the oppressive darkness gives way to the first light of dawn. The cursed stretch of Highway 29 fades into the rearview mirror, replaced by familiar sights and the comforting hum of the open road. Mike's hands are still shaking, his mind reeling from the events of the night, but he knows he's made it out alive. The story ends with Mike pulling into a busy truck stop, the sun rising over the horizon. He's safe, but the memory of Highway 29 will haunt him forever. He knows he'll never take an unfamiliar shortcut again, and as he sits in the truck stop diner, sipping a cup of coffee, he can't help but glance nervously out the window, half expecting to see the cursed highway waiting for him.